Morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time you're tuning in, the program called What's Going on FlintTalkRadio.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program, and we are always glad to have you with us here at Flint's number one podcast studio in the city of Flint and Genesee County. And we are trying to become the number one podcast program and studio throughout the United States. And we're getting close to that because you are paying attention. I think given the fact that we're taping this program on the 30th of January, and we will be posting our comments on the things that should not have happened in 2013 on Facebook tomorrow. The things that should not have occurred, that we would have been better off if it had not taken place. We're going to be doing that particular piece on Facebook, and we are inviting you to pay attention to what we're doing on Facebook because we do a lot of things there as well. But we're now at the studio, and we're very glad to have you out there listening to the program. And don't forget, in 2014, we want you to pay attention to all the things we're doing here at FlintTalkRadio.com. We're going to be doing some things here. John was telling me that we are going to be doing some things in a much more expansive way at the studio in 2014. They're doing some things upstairs in terms of renovations going on up there. And I can't hardly wait to see some of the plans that we have on the drawing board that is going to make this experiment that we're doing here much more exciting. And we know you're going to be very much appreciative of what is happening here as we begin to expand the productions and to go into other arenas that we've not gone into at this point. But we're just trying to maintain our relevance, and we're going to continue to do that. Well, today is the 30th of January. And I came to the studio to do, first of all, an abbreviated version of the program we do. We normally are here from 2 to 3 on Mondays. And today we're going to do an abbreviated version because of the holiday that's coming up, the last of the year, and then, of course, the first of 2014. And we want to make sure that we're not taking too much of your time away from your holiday celebration, because I know you are in the midst of doing last-minute shopping and doing all kinds of things you do at the end of the year, and getting ready for the first of the year meal, which in my household will be, what is that? We have hog head and black-eyed peas, which is a tradition in our household because it was something that was started when I was living at home, and my mom would always have that, and she would say, well, that's what you have the first day of the year. But I always thought it was because we spent all that money during the Christmas holidays. My mom was broke at the beginning of the year. But maybe that was not the case, but it's a tradition in our family. And so on the first, we'll be having hog head and black-eyed peas, cornbread, maybe some chicken. We'll see what's fixed in other arenas of the kitchen, but that's pretty much the staple we're going to be having. Hope you're having a wonderful holiday out there. I want to say a belated Merry Christmas to you. And you'll notice here at the FlintTalkRadio.com, we don't mind saying Merry Christmas. We're not saying Happy Holidays, and trying to avoid the traditions in this country in another sense, and that is Merry Christmas is still Merry Christmas in this country, and Happy Holidays and all the other things as well. But we used to just have that as not a controversial thing to say, and we don't mind saying it here. In fact, if it's controversial, we're going to say it because of that. What I came to the studio today to do was to have you to look at a reading list that I think we need to take into 2014. So at the beginning of the year, we came to the studio with a number of books here, and these are some of my favorites. I just finished them a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to bring them to your attention and say, okay, here's your reading assignment. And I'm going to be a despotic host today and say these are books that you're assigned to read before you watch the program next week, as we do the hour-long version. One of the books, though, I brought to the studio because the word is out that when Congress reconvenes next year, there are two items on the agenda they're going to be carrying out at the very beginning of the Congress meeting for the 2014 session. And one of those is, of course, the confirmation of the nomination that is to be expected of the Vice Chair of the Federal Reserve System, Yellen, who is now getting ready and being situated to take over the place from Bernanke, who's going to be stepping down in January. And then Yellen is going to be stepping up into that position and be confirmed by the Senate. As you know, in Article 1, Section 3, the Senate confirms the president's nomination, so it's a shoo-in that's going to happen.
Do you know something about the Federal Reserve thing that I didn't find out until I read the book on Greenspan, The Man Behind the Money, that they don't have any real requirements of these people. Greenspan didn't have a degree in economics, and he never did have one until one institution awarded him an honorary one, basically. Mm-hmm. And he never did the academic setting. The Krugman's a little bit different. I think he actually has a degree in it, which I think he's still like neo-Keynesian at best. But none of the Yellen's no different than Bernanke or Greenspan in their approach to a government.
Should have been a secretary.
Right. So, I mean, it's just, it's more of the same people. I mean, Obama criticized Bush's handling of the economy. Who did he put in a place for oversight of that stuff? The same people Bush had. Mm-hmm. So how we had a change of guard.
Yeah. I think another thing, too, John, and those points are excellent points you're making. I think another thing is that the Federal Reserve is nothing other than an insular group that gives cover to the ones who are really running it. I've never believed that the Federal Reserve chair is confirmed for 14 years by the Senate, and then they lose control of a person they confirm in the position of running the Federal Reserve. I've never bought into that, and I'm backed up by a comment made on page 505 of the book written by Schweitzer in the book called A Patriot's History of the United States. He and Adams wrote that book, and on page 505 of that book, you'll see them making a comment about the Federal Reserve, and they're not buying this argument either, that this was something that was that where they don't have any control and so on. If you look at the way that the government operates in Washington, they want these insular organizations that carrying out their mandates from behind the scenes. They're orchestrating it, but they don't want the political fire that comes with the decisions that are being made. And so I think the Fed is another example of that. John was making this point, though, and I want to say that you have to look at the first person that was over the Federal Reserve, who was Andrew Mellon, and those who are importing sinister reasons why it was set up in terms of what is happening right now. We need to understand that Andrew Mellon was the first chair, and he was marvelous in that position. And then from that point, it all went downhill. But at the very beginning, what they were doing was responding to what had occurred in 2007, where you had these fluctuations in the economy, and they thought they could fix it by putting a regulatory agency in place. John, do you agree with this, by the way, that the initial reason why they set the Fed up was because of what they're doing right now, when they think they can actually pass, fiat laws, and somehow they can regulate the economy and dispense some of the laws in economics that they don't think will apply if the laws can be written to in fact prohibit the law from being invoked.
All I know is the Federal Reserve System, after the inception of it and the establishment of it, we've had the First World War ensued, Second World War. It was basically, it's a handful of people who have really they don't have really any oversight from our government. I mean, we don't have the Federal Reserve System as a central bank. Mm-hmm. And it's like it was something feared by the Founding Fathers more than a standing military.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's so manipulated because, I did an interview with Mark Thornton of the Mises Institute a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And we talked about what the difference would be if we went back to gold standard. It'd be a less likelihood that we'd be involved in all these wars. Mm-hmm. And so, Is
that an unintended consequence, you think?
Yeah, it's unintended. I think some people who initially backed it thought this would be the panacea or something like that there was going to be, but I think if you in a historical retrospect, you'd have to say that it's probably the cause of many of the problems that we're facing. We didn't. There's no insulated pockets now in our economy. Mm. Everything feels ripples of it. Mm-hmm. And if the purpose of this was to actually make sure there was shared pain, then that's been a success. Mm-hmm. But if it was to prevent this kind of stuff, I would say it's a disaster.
Right. The insularity issue is not to insulate from the hazards that are caused by the policies put in place by the Fed. The insularity I'm referring to is the insularity of the politicians who do not want to take the responsibility for policies that are being put in place here, which I think that behind the scenes they have no objections to it, but publicly they don't have to pay any price at the polls. But I do agree with what you're saying here about the Federal Reserve and some of the things that have come as a result of it. So I think a lot of it too comes out of the fact that you give someone insular power. I mean, look at the Supreme Court. I was going to start with Vedder's book, but let me start up with this book right here by Mark Levine. I just finished this book. It's called Men in Black, and I think it ties into what we're talking about right now, John. The subtitle of it is How the Supreme Court is Destroying America. And what Mark Levine is getting to here in this book is that you have an insular group that serves for life as long as it members are on good behavior. And look at what has happened to this insular group in terms of their responsibility, which was, in fact, to be the arbiter between the other instruments of government, the executive branch of government, and also the legislative branch of government. And they were supposed to be the ones that would arbitrate in terms of the conflict that goes on between the other two. Their role was to be very minor in terms of just simply arbitrating between the two sides, the two political sides, I should say, and they would be the legal arm that would in fact just tell us what the parameters are that are established in each of their spaces and the boundaries around which the Constitution draws, that the Constitution draws around their authority. But what Mark Levine proves in his book, Men in Black, is that, and this is his premise, and I certainly would endorse it, is that where they were intended to have a very minor role in terms of the affairs of the country, they have a major role. And he is making the case very well, in fact, that the Supreme Court has been the most dangerous instrument that we've had in terms of this out-of-control government that we are faced with right now than the other two branches. And his role was not intended to be anything like that, nothing of the sort. But why did that take place, though? And what I'm contending here is that it took place because of the insularity of the institution. Anytime you put power in the hands of a group of people and they know that they're not subject to any type of retribution, politically or otherwise, and they're certainly not going to be impeached unless they do something that is so untoward that cannot be sustained, then they can sit up there and make these rulings, 5-4 rulings, where one person decides all of the things that are going to be legal in the country, including Obamacare, which is clearly not legal. But one person, Roberts, came over with the 4 radicals the 3 radicals, and one that's moderately a radical, Stephen Breyer, and came on the side of these other 3, the 3 that are radical on the court, some of whom have actually said they don't even believe in the Constitution, and believe that we ought to apply international law in the place of the law that is set in our own document called the Constitution of the United States. He sided with that group over there, the leftists on the court, and here's Roberts telling us that Obamacare is constitutional, and they passed the smell test, which is absolutely absurd and ridiculous. The government telling the argument they put forth before the court was that they could, what they really were arguing was that the Commerce Clause, which is in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, which really was set up in the Constitution because the commerce was not regular under the Articles of Confederation, but they wanted to make the commerce regular, so then they put in there that the federal government has a right to regulate interstate commerce. Why? Because states can't do it. Because Massachusetts would regulate it in their favor, and then the state next to it would regulate in their favor. Here's Pennsylvania doing something in its favor, and you'd have chaos. So the federal government, which has no skin in the game, so to speak, would be able to regulate it. And what they have done is make it appear that the Commerce Clause gives the Congress skin in the game, where they can now tell us that not only is commerce in terms of the commerce is out there being done and engaged in by businesses, but commerce is also non-engagement in it. And if I'm not in fact involved in commerce, somehow that's an involvement in commerce, because my non-involvement affects the decision-making made in the commercial realm. That's what they were arguing before the Supreme Court. I mean, this is ludicrous. And then Roberts, though, couldn't sustain, because he is supposed to be a conservative jurist, he could not sustain that argument. So what he did was go back to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, which is the part of it part of the rules that's put in place. Congress can pass laws affecting income tax, or rather can tax, not income tax, because that's 1916, that's 1913 in the 16th Amendment. But they had the power to tax, and what Roberts did was he couldn't ferret out that ridiculous explanation. He could even stomach that, but he could stomach it under the power to tax, and said that this is a tax and therefore it can be sustained, that the government can make you buy a product, otherwise they can tax you because you didn't buy it. That's unconstitutional. And if they had to go before the voters, I guarantee you that Roberts would not have done that, nor would those other judges have done that. But by a 5-4 ruling, we have one person on the court that has made this is almost like dictatorial. We had one person in the court to decide this is the law of the land, regardless of what the Constitution says. And in Mark Levine's other book, called the one that's called Ameritopia, I've been reading a lot of Mark Levine's book because Mark Levine picked up an idea that I put on Facebook in February, and I was calling for the convening of a national convention, because that's the only thing that's going to slow this train down. And I'm reading a lot of his work because he put out the Constitution, he put out the Freedom Amendments, and that really pricked my interest, because I had written about it 6 months earlier before his book came out. And when I saw him picking up the mantle and the baton and all the other things and running with it, I said, well, let me get behind some of the things he's doing, read some of his books, get an idea of what he's talking about. And he made these tremendous points in his books. I'm reading him much more thoroughly now than before, and he's making some excellent points. And in his book called Ameritopia, and in his book called the Freedom Amendments, that we've got to rein in the court, and we've got to have a way in which we can suborn the judgments they make that are not constitutionally grounded, and have a way to, in fact, intervene. What he's advocating is 3/5 of the states can come in and say, no, that's not going to happen, and we're not going to follow that. And if 3/5 of the states, in fact, would contravene the arguments placed before the court, then that will, in fact, not be the judgment of the United States of America. In other words, we've got to deal with the problem that has now come up, that the lesser of the 3 federal branches of government that was intended to be the lesser of the 3, to just simply be the arbiter, and also to tell us in clear terms what the constitutional mandates are and what the boundaries are, which are clearly spelled out in enumeration of powers in Article 1, Section 8. We were thinking that I shouldn't say we were, the framers were thinking that would be the limits of the power of the federal government's Supreme Court, but that has not been the case. Certainly not in the last, how many years would that be? I would say since 1917, with the passing of the Alien and Sedition Act, that was there's another act that was passed in that year also. And when the court endorsed it, with Oliver Wendell Holmes writing this nonsense, out of which we got, you can't holler fire in a theater, and making that a speech issue in order to justify them taking speech away from us in other arenas, when hollering fire in the theater is not a speech issue, it's a property issue. You can't get up there and read the Gettysburg Address either. Not if I'm paying $9.50 and $6 for popcorn, and I came to see Superman, you up there reciting the Gettysburg Address. That's not a speech issue. That's a property issue. Guy sold you a ticket, and you up there on the stage, and start interfering. That's a problem, and they're gonna stop you from doing that because you're violating the property rights of the person that let you in there on his property to, in fact, watch a movie at his, in fact, free will to do so. And if you violate that, you're going out of there. And I'm going to be one of the ones that can carry you out. But anyway, Mark Levine is telling us about the problem that we have, and we have it. Let's understand, we have this problem because of the insularity of the Supreme Court. Those guys and ladies will not be up there doing what they're doing in terms of making us buy a product. And I don't know if you noticed it out there in Flint Talk Radio land, But have you noticed how those politicians who were so resolute, we're not going to change anything for Obamacare, we're not going to rescind any of the things we passed on February the 21st of 2010, you know, and then Obama signed the law February 23rd, 2010, the Obamacare, which is markedly called the Affordable Care Act, which, of course, if you're Rockefeller, you agree with that. But if you're a person making my money, you know it's unaffordable. And Obamacare, where is any carrying in any of that language that was passed? Well, they were so resolute. You know, remember when they were they were standing on their they were doing standing your ground law in the Congress, and they were not going to back down. There's a song about that one, and they stood there resolutely. We're not going to change anything. Blah blah blah. Well, do you see them right now? Running for cover. That's you, Mary Landrieu, down there in Louisiana. We coming after you big time. We can't stand more of that nonsense that you did in terms of wanting to pass a law to make the insurance companies cover for you because you're out there now. And because people's insurance is being dropped, you want to make them, you want to come behind your own nonsense and make them, in fact, not put anybody off their rolls, which you're making it too prohibitive for them to keep them on the rolls. And you want to pass a law like you can make somebody do business at a loss to the cost of doing the business out there in the marketplace. This is absolutely absurd, and and I hope the voters in Louisiana, and we're gonna be working with people in Louisiana and with some other networks around the country. We're gonna make sure that we come after some folks in 2014. One person was saying in my post, and I'm gonna come back to my books, but one person was saying in my post about running for an office. I told him I'm not interested in voting anybody in. I'm interested in voting people out. And in 2014, that's what we're going to do. Okay. I was going to tell you about this first book I had out, which was the one written by Richard Vedder and Lowell E. Galloway. But I'm going to start with this book right here by Mark Levine, The Men in Black. I want persons out there in Flint Talk Radio land to read Mark Levine's book, because I'll tell you something, until we understand what's really going on in this country, we can't get a handle on what's taking place, then we can't really put skid marks and brakes on what they're doing in Washington. We got to stop some of the things that they're doing in Washington. We're going to be Zimbabwe. I mean, just the printing of the money with the Federal Reserve is going to bring that about. And we already seeing that we go to the stores and our money doesn't buy anything. And they're putting out grocery in these little bags so you can carry it like this right here, like you're carrying a purse. And because the bags aren't that big anymore because there's nothing in them. Because the money's not buying anything. And I don't know if you notice on the shelves where they've downsized all of the product, because what they're doing is trying to fight against this inflationary decision-making going on in Washington, where they're in fact printing all these dollars, and the price of the food is going up because the dollars are not worth anything.
You know what I hear, too? This debate for the minimum wage being increased all over. It's like they're talking about how the cost of living and all that stuff. What's not addressed, and I don't know if maybe it doesn't have a significant factor, but nobody talks about the role taxation has in making life more livable for people who don't earn that much. Mm-hmm. But no, they never talk about that.
That's right.
They never talk about the hidden taxes that even the most vulnerable people, economically vulnerable people, are paying a huger portion of. Mm-hmm. Okay, they don't talk about that, but they just want to jack up the price of the minimum wage. It's basically unfunded a mandate. And then let's face it, some people's jobs, we all work hard. We all think we deserve more. Everybody else agree, but not you. That's the way I look at it. Well, but they never addressed this. They never addressed the role of taxation and why the expectation for the wages is so high. Mm-hmm. They never addressed that. Well, of course, the government would have to admit they're behind taxes, and ultimately they're behind inflation, which is that's a major cause of inflation in this country is taxes.
Yes, John, you have such a great insight, and all of that is true. The fact of the matter is that the government is causing the pain, economic pain on both ends. Those persons out there talking about they want $15 an hour to work at McDonald's and flip burgers need to understand why their problem in not making $15 an hour is in place here. It's not because McDonald's not paying $15 an hour. It's that there are no jobs above the level of flipping burgers they can go to, where the skill level is on another level that allows them to make the salary on the next rung of the ladder. The jobs they have at McDonald's, where they're stuck in these dead-end jobs for entry-level people, those who, like high school students and maybe the ones that are going to college, but maybe in the summertime they're coming back and working. And it allows them to work at the lower rungs of the economy. But the problem they are looking at, and they're blaming businesses for it, is that their politicians have killed off the other kinds of things, that the opportunities that would be there otherwise if they didn't have what John was talking about, these high taxes, on certainly these prohibitive kinds of regulations on businesses. I mean, 107,000 pages of regulations on businesses, 5,000 pages added a year. You know, if you didn't have that, and you would strangle the economy, as I said in one of my posts last week, that if they would stop strangling the economy, we can grow our way out of this debt. And we could, in fact, grow the economy to create jobs and so on.
You know, another point I'd like to make, too, and we got to rush here because we got another, 5 minutes. But,
Okay.
Well, Obama one-time speech says, people like me should be paying more taxes. And then when it comes around tax time, I heard that he took every opportunity he could to reduce his tax burden. He went from 36% to 18%.
Yeah.
Okay, and if he's so concerned about the people like him getting away with not paying their fair share, why don't you just suck it up and pay the bill as it was instead of trying reducing it?
There's a Section D. I forget exactly what part of the Federal Reserve Act it is. The IRS allows for you to send an additional amount of money. In other words, they would not refuse to accept your money. And I have noticed how people like this president and also Warren Buffett, who wants everyone to pay more taxes, how he has been doing everything he can not to pay the $1 billion that's been assessed against one of his businesses, and he's trying to fight that. And you're just claiming that we should pay more taxes, but fighting every step of the way to do so.
Every liberal I've talked to, I said that. You know, they'll say, well, the rich aren't paying their fair. And these people are usually well-heeled people. Like, one time I was an ex-girlfriend whose family was lawyers, and I was arguing with one of the lawyers. And I actually scored points on him, by the way. Anyway, I said, well, okay, if you feel so strongly, I know they'll take your money. Why don't you? And it's always ends the same way. They won't let you do it. I said, hell, they won't. Sign it. Sign the check for them. They won't.
Oh.
Yeah, they'll sign. They'll take your money. They'll take little kids' money from a lemonade stand. Bill Clinton did. So I mean, they're greedy. They're greedy people.
Yeah, there's a case, John. You probably remember Wesley Snipes, who was put in jail for not paying his taxes. He sat there with the IRS, thinking he could get some forgiveness. Since they were getting ready to put him into federal prison for tax evasion, and he sat there in terms of negotiating with them and wrote them 2 checks, each one $5 million to pay his back taxes and restitution and the principal on the interest on the principal, and they took his checks and still put him in jail. If anybody thinks that the federal government, the IRS, I'm talking about the one that was targeting those who had anywhere near their name the word patriotism. Anywhere, anything that even remotely sounded like they believed in the Constitution and that they had in respect for James Madison. If you had that in your name, then you could expect the IRS to come after you, and not only the money part, but in terms of the philosophy of this Gestapo group. But the point is that this is hypocrisy on the part of those persons who are doing things and then throwing this proverbial stone and hiding their hand. Because if they get their hands off the economy, quite frankly, this economy will take off. Look how it is able to manage to survive and thrive under the conditions and layers of weight being chained down by these politicians. I was saying today, as a matter of fact, on Facebook, that to solve this problem, one guy asked me, what would you do to solve the problem? I was telling him it's not hard what to do. Number one, I would get rid of this behemoth size of this government. It would not be 2.1 million persons employed in the federal government. What is this? Well, you are 800,000 persons more, the larger than Walmart. That wouldn't happen. Walmart has 1.3 million employers in the United States. They got 2.1 million worldwide. And John's telling me we're run out of time here. So, but I would downsize government. I would, in fact, therefore, not have to have the taxes that you have to send to Washington, and I would use that money, the money that's not taken, it would be able to be spent in the private sector. That would, in fact, increase the job market. I mean, this is not rocket science. Okay, well, we have to get out of here, but before I do that, I do want to do what I said I came to the studio to do, and that is to name a few books that will give you a reading list for 2014 as we begin to get more informed and we're getting ready to take the country back. because we have an election coming up in November of next year. The Men in Black by Mark Levine is a very good book. I'd like to see you read that. Out of Work, written by Richard Vedder and Lowell Galloway. Who Killed the Constitution? You'd be surprised. And this book is written by Dr. Thomas Woods and Dr. Kevin Guzman. And a book that should be read by those who think that there was so much racism during the Bush administration and things of that sort. Here's a book of a man that worked in that administration, Ron Christie. The book is called Black in the White House. Okay, folks, we will see you next week for the whole hour edition. Until next time, we want you to have a nice New Year's Eve tomorrow and also New Year's on January 1st. Until we get together next week, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.